crank things up in the second hour with our guy Bryce Kuhn from the Bengal Tiger on 3. Bryce, how are you?
Doing well, Hunt. I love how you let it in there, man. We finally get to talk about some real games and no more fall camp conversation or preseason portal realignment. None of that crap. We can talk actual football.
I can't complain too much when the baseball team gets us all the way through June. Like, that's a nice gift. But July can be a bit of a slog, and then early August. Actually, early August is good because they just start. Middle August can be a slog. We're through that now. It's time to roll. So let's talk about this LSU defense a little bit. I'm super high on the defense. I've listened to you and Matthew Bruni on the Bengal Tiger podcast. It kind of sounds like y'all echo that. Why do you feel good about this defense?
Yeah, man, and I think it really just kind of starts with, and Kelly kind of hit on this today, just the amount of snaps that you brought in through the portal, the veteran talent. I mean, it's just hard to imagine those guys just, every single one of them not panning out, right? I mean, it doesn't feel like a likely scenario. I mean, the guys that you brought in, at the very least, are going to be high floor players. And if we're just being real, I don't know, across the entire 11 on defense over the past couple of years, how many guys you could say, hey, consistently, I know what I'm going to get out of this guy. And it's not a knock, it's just the personnel difference, and so I just think that is a major key. And then, man, if you've been listening to those podcasts, you know how I feel about the safety play. Between A.J. Halsey and Marcus Cooley, I think that might be the two positions where you have upgraded just the most. I mean, just in terms of snap count, the floor, but also the ceiling. Hunt, you've been out there at several of the scrimmages and camps, and, man, their willingness and ability to come down into that run alley and make plays and then also make them, it's miles ahead of where that safety room has been the past couple of years. And then to kind of add on the back end, Mansour Lane, just a guy that I think is going to be a Swiss Army knife. He's going to be a high-level player for you. Wanted to come to LSU to boost his draft stock. So I just think that they've elevated across the board, that the floor of this defense, there's a reason for fans to get excited. I don't know what the ceiling is. I think it could be really, really good. But you've just elevated the floor so much, it's hard not to have confidence.
Well, let's go to the offense now. You've seen a lot of them, and they've been working against that defense. We're going to talk wins and losses because you've got a piece up at the Bengal Tiger right now that talks about it. But, what do you feel like is about this offense? Where's your confidence level there overall?
Yeah, I'll start with, the skill positions. I mean, LSU is going to have the skill talent to match just about anybody in the country. Wide receiver-wise, I love what they have there. I'm really interested to see the utilization of Bauer Sharp and Trey'Dez Green at the tight end spot. I mean, that's a lot of matchup nightmares that we could, see Joe Sloan utilize. But it all comes down to offensive line. That's what Brian Kelly talked about today. And, my coworker Matthew Bruni just put up a piece on, kind of his quotes about playing more than 5 guys, 6, 7, 8 guys on that offensive line, even this weekend. And trying to find that match in a primetime game is not really where you want to be. But I think that there is a reason for excitement with this offense. I go back to the year Jaden Daniels took the lead. What did Joe Sloan, Brian Kelly, and even Mike Denbrock at that time say? Decisiveness. Pre-snap decisiveness. Knew where he could go, read the defense. And, man, Nussmeier has looked really good in fall camp. And I think if that little thing has changed for him, it unlocks all of the God-given talent he has. That's never been the issue, right? The arm talent, all that kind of stuff. But the mental side for him, if that switched, it takes his offense into a different stratosphere. So if the offensive line can figure it out, I feel great about where this offense can go. And obviously that helps a run game that I think has one of probably the more underrated backs in the country. When you start to kind of look at, Caden Durham being left off some list, and, I'm seeing a lot of social media accounts, not have Durham in maybe their ranking of running backs in the country. I think the kid's extremely talented. I think Harlem Berry's going to be a force, and Caleb Jackson could be utilized situationally. But there's just too many weapons, Hunt, for them not to be middle of the pack to the top half of the SEC. If some things click, especially on offensive line and mentally for Garrett Nussmeier, you're looking where I think you could have a top 3 unit in the conference.
In August, everybody's going to work on screens and draws and the quick game. Like, that's not new to anybody. Everybody's got to work on it. Do you believe that LSU has spent more time on things in case the offensive line struggles than they usually would?
I do. I think that there is a awareness of who they are. And Joe Sloan hinted at that in his press conference. And, I mean, you don't have to be in the media to know if you watch the LSU press conferences, you listen to Joe Sloan. He says a lot in a little amount of time in terms of packing what he wants to talk about. And one thing he talked about was understanding the personnel grouping. And I think that's something that maybe last year, I could be totally wrong, and tell me this, I felt like they tried to put the, square peg into the round hole verbally in terms of what they wanted to do offensively. And it saw at times where fans and media, we were sitting in the press box just banging our head against the wall, watching them do things that weren't working. And you can't abandon things. I understand that. But I think this year there's an understanding of, hey, if that run game doesn't get started quickly this Saturday, let's utilize Aaron Anderson. Let's utilize Davion Thomas and all the different formations and places we could put him. Let's get creative, because you don't have time to ram your head on 2nd and 4, 3rd and 2, and not get yardage. I mean, that just cannot happen on the road against Clemson, against that defensive front. So you've got to give some different looks to open things up. And that's the last part of it. I mean, last year, you go back and watch that Texas A&M game was the biggest one for me, and Florida to an extent. Teams started loading the box, in that sense. And they knew what LSU couldn't do, and they knew what they were trying to do. And if you can mix in some looks, and I think they have been doing that, it gives you some flexibility, maybe a little bit more room for error in that run game where it doesn't have to be perfect from, the start of the game.
All right, so you went through a piece predicting a record. I'm curious, did you go through game by game and see what the record was, or did you have a record in mind and then play to it?
I went game by game. I'll be honest with you. I got to about the last 3 weeks, and I was like, okay, I think this is where I'm settling. So, no, this was a strictly game by game. I did not want to go in with a record in mind.
So, a loss in the opener against Clemson, not exactly a hot take, but you feel like that's just a little too tough an environment for LSU at this point?
Right now, I just think that Clemson brings in an experienced group that has played together, and I feel more comfortable. If I was just, from putting my money where my mouth is, I would put the money on Clemson in that aspect. Will say this, I don't think the team that plays Clemson on Saturday is going to be the same team that plays them later in the year, but that continuity aspect, I kind of like that a little bit, in a slight favorite there this weekend.
And then you have obviously another loss coming up against, was Alabama the next one? Yeah, Alabama 34-31. These are the Clemson score that you had put down was 31-27, and then the one in Tuscaloosa you've got as a high scoring game as well. Even though I think that we feel really good about the defense, and I think Clemson and Alabama both have good defense, you still feel like track meets are kind of inevitable?
I think it's going to happen because, and especially that juncture of the season, look, what, your second week in November, you know who you are. I think that the offensive talent on both sides of the football, or both teams in that Alabama-LSU game, will shine at that point. Defense can make big momentum plays, but I think both offenses, especially LSU, is going to be too hard to keep down. And look, I get the concern about Ty Simpson. I understand that. I've said multiple times, and I think I put that in this piece and in our podcast. I think Alabama's got the talent around him. If he can be a point guard, that's fine. He does not have to be, the number one pick in the draft. If he can just delegate, if he can make the right decision, they've got skill talent around him to be able to put up some points. So, yeah, I mean, as much as we've talked about the defense on, it's one of those for me that it's like, I just think there's too much offensive talent, too much variety of it to hold it down for too long.
And then Ole Miss, week 5, you got LSU winning in Oxford, 35-30, another kind of high-scoring game. That would not be the first time those two teams went back and forth on the field.
Yeah, my first year on the beat was 2023, and, man, that game, I know it's just imprinted on LSU fans in their minds. It was not fun to watch, but just watching that track meet, I don't think it'll be that. But I do think there's an aspect in, look, you could really dive into those scores more. I think Ole Miss scores late to keep that closer than it looks on paper. I don't doubt Lane Kiffin. I know there's a ton of upheaval happening in Oxford, but to me, Kiffin's getting to the point at a place, and I've heard you guys talk about this, where they don't win like they're winning right now. That's not something that happens at Ole Miss. So he's doing a good job. You got to give him credit. That's not something that happens in their history. So I'm starting to get him the benefit of the doubt that they're going to be at least respectable offensively. And look, it's a tough road environment, still kind of early in the season there to round out the month of September. I think LSU's offense is going to be fine in that game, but I think Lane Kiffin's good job of scheming stuff up is going to be able to find, some things that work against this LSU defense.
So that win in Oxford, a win against South Carolina at home, win against Florida, a win on the road against Vanderbilt. It comes to 9-2 on the road at Oklahoma, and you've got the Sooners winning by 4 there to knock LSU down to 10-3 as opposed to 10-2. That would be a heck of a theater there in Norman, but ultimately a disappointment. Why'd you settle on that?
Man, I know that there's really a divide on how people feel about this Oklahoma team, right? There's people like me, and I don't know your take on it, but they really kind of feel like Oklahoma might have something in terms of marrying their OC, who was with John Mateer the previous stop, to having him now. I think that is a key component when you're breaking in a transfer quarterback or a guy that hasn't played in your system. Well, you have that. The quarterback understands the reads. He understands the checks, the call-outs. That is something that when you talk about breaking into quarterbacks across the SEC, that is what I think gives Mateer a little bit of a difference of a change from guys like Jackson Arnold at Auburn and all these other guys that are entering the system for the first time. And I'm really high on the running back they've got, Jade Naughton. I think he was one of the better running backs in the country the past couple of years, really good in the ACC last year with Cal, and which just sounds crazy to even say that we're talking about Cal in the ACC. But, no, he's talented, and, Shea Dixon and I were kind of talking about this on our pod last night about it can't go worse for Oklahoma, right? Like, I guess it always could. I guess I'll put that out into the stratosphere. But, it can't go worse in terms of how hurt they were in the discombobulation at quarterback that they had. I mean, you would have to think that it's going to be a little bit better. And so do I think Oklahoma's playing for a playoff spot in that? Could this game be a play-in for a playoff spot? Maybe, but it also could be a scenario where Oklahoma's playing to keep Brent Venables' job. And look, going on the road, if you notice, all 3 of my losses are on the road. I feel comfortable saying LSU can win at home. When you go on the road, man, that's where I want to see the growth and the maturity of this team. Do I think they could win all 3 games that I put down as losses? I do. I want to put that out there. I do. I'm just really, and I think a large portion of the fan base is in this spot, Hunt. I need to see it to believe it. It could start this week, and we know, viewpoints change throughout the season, but that last game in Norman could have some implications where, Oklahoma could be that wounded animal in the corner, and that's not a team you want to play in their own house.
If you want to read about how LSU sucks, you can go to the Bengal Tiger and read Bryce's prediction. I'm kidding. Bryce, great addition to the team over there at the Bengal Tiger. Shea Dixon, Matthew Bruni, Bryce Coon, Bengal Tiger podcast as well, wherever you find your podcast. We appreciate some time, man.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
He is Bryce Coon from the Bengal Tiger, part of the team over at On3. They do awesome work. I appreciate him for giving us a little bit of time. We'll do it again with Bryce very, very soon. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.